Welcome to Indian Road, our very first show right here on Cheyenne and Arapaho television. We plan on bringing you entertaining and engaging stories about Native people with this new show. We're coming to you with this new show from Roman Nose State Park, just outside Watonga in Blaine County. You know, the park is named after a Cheyenne chief, Henry Roman Nose, who lived in this area until he died in 1917. When you talk about tribal leaders in this part of Oklahoma, you have to include Lawrence Hart in that conversation. He's been serving people for half a century. He always encourages Native people to set their goals high. That's something he knows quite a bit about. World War II may have been thousands of miles away, but in tiny Hammond, Oklahoma, it was on Lawrence Hart's wall.
My dad put up a huge map of the world in our living room. So as we ate, we could look at it. And he would tell us where our forces were.
Military service became something very real to young Lawrence when some family friends came to visit, wearing crisp, clean uniforms with shiny shoes.
That was it. They were real heroes to me as they came to my grandfather's house. And they wanted a blessing before they went back overseas to fight the enemy.
The two Marine code talkers had a big influence on young Lawrence. He made up his mind just a few years later to follow the same road.
I was working on what I wanted to do in life, and I made some ambitions, and it was one of them. That was to be a pilot.
But Lawrence's teachers weren't so sure. They thought becoming a pilot was perhaps a little out of reach for a young Cheyenne kid from Hammond, Oklahoma.
They just cautioned me, said I was setting my goals too high.
Lawrence took that as a challenge, studying even harder in high school, then college, to make his dream of flying come true. He became the nation's first full-blood Native American jet fighter pilot, and he stood out in the crowd.
Yeah, a lot of people brought it up, and they really encouraged me. They stood behind me, and I knew my tribe was behind me, pulling for me, rooting for me, yeah. And I would fly home every chance I got. I'd fly either to Vance and then pick up a car and drive here, or go down to Altus. And usually, in that case, someone from here would come after me.
A Native American fighter pilot was a curiosity for some in those days. This was played out in January of 1957 on the wildly popular TV show, What's My Line?
It's a bit of a strange name. We haven't had one like that.
That is my Cheyenne name.
Are
I'm
you
a full-blooded Cheyenne Indian.
Full-blooded Cheyenne Indian, and you're known as Black Beaver.
Right.
Some people in my squadron, mostly wives, sent in my name.
Oh, you didn't even know it?
No. Until I was contacted. And then my whole squadron went with me.
Black Beaver, I want you to think of me as white mink. I have to ask you to forgive me, but I didn't understand what the tribe was. Which tribe is it?
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne?
I called my
Do you hold a
folks,
position of importance in the Cheyenne tribe?
and then they called everybody that they knew who had a TV, and so they all watched it.
Second Lieutenant Lawrence Hart is a jet fighter pilot with the United States Marines.
The young Marines seemed destined for a long military career, but all that was about to change. In a short span, Lawrence lost his grandfather, his mother, and a close friend from college. As a young boy, Lawrence had accompanied his grandfather, John P. Hart, on many trips to the Four Corners area around Towat, Colorado. The elder Hart was a Cheyenne peace chief, and when he sensed his time was growing short, he requested that Lawrence take his place. When he came back to Oklahoma in June of 1957, it wasn't just to visit. Lawrence Hart became a Cheyenne chief.
a teepee was set up, and I was allowed to go in. And they all talked to me, just one by one, from the left side of the door all the way around. I was asked to dance with them.
On his flight back to Pensacola, Hart needed to get rid of some fuel, and he did it as you might think a young Marine pilot might.
Could have burned it or dumped it, but I wanted to go out in the Gulf, climb as high as I could, and then just flip over and pull the nose down and go beyond Mach 1, just for the experience. So that's what I did. It didn't take me long to go through the speed of sound.
He broke through more than just a sound barrier on that trip. Hart was also breaking through to the next stage of his life.
I think I saw myself as becoming a man.
Many of his ancestors had been warriors before they were peacekeepers, and Lawrence Hart was no different. He saw his military service as crucial to his next mission, ministering to his people.
The Mennonite faith is compatible with the peace chief tradition. I mean, we have chiefs who vow never to use force.
Lawrence and his wife Betty have been married for 55 years and have pastored the Koinonia Mennonite Church in Clinton for almost this long. They also established Clinton's Cheyenne Cultural Center with the hopes of bringing about a cultural renewal in young Native people.
Yeah, I think our ancestors have faced many of the problems of young people, or many of the obstacles that are faced by our young people. It's who you are. You need to know about your tribal traditions because you have a very rich heritage. And it's there for you to embrace, to live. And they can find it in our stories, in our songs, in our language. So they just need to know who they are, where they came from to succeed.
Words of wisdom from someone who's been there and done that. Coming up next, some fantastic artwork from a CNA tribal member, right here on Indian Road.
Growing up in a state deeply rooted in Native American culture and traditions, I know we have a long and rich history to live up to. A history of leaders, heroes, innovators, doctors, athletes. What will the books our children read say about us? What beliefs will they hold? We have to tell them the truth, that everything is possible through hard work and determination. Today, childhood obesity affects American Indian and Alaska Native youth more than any other race. To change this, together we must eat healthy, be active, and empower our youth to transform their lives and their communities. That's why I've joined the First Lady to launch Let's Move in Indian Country. Let's write a story together where all of us do everything possible to improve the health and lives of Native American youth. Visit Let's Move in Indian Country to find out more.
I don't know what's in second or third place in most people's lives, but I know what's in first, our children.
Native American youth are the most at-risk population in this country.
And that's why I created the Center for Native American Youth.
We are working with tribes and families to improve the lives of Native American children, and most of all, promote hope.
We focus on preventing teen suicide and shining a light on the challenges Native youth face.
Please help us build better opportunities for Native American children. Visit our website.
Ledger art is a traditional art form that's over 100 years old. And even though it's been around a long time, many new artists are putting their own contemporary stamp on it. CNA tribal member Gordon Yellowman has a showing at Redlands Community College titled Artworks by Yellowman.
This exhibit is called Yellowman, the artworks of Yellowman. It's the title of the exhibit. It's going to be running from October 1st to November 16th. And I dedicated this show, it's my very first exhibition showing to my mother, the late June Yellowman. Because she's the one that encouraged me and instilled me the values of the artistic traditions of our people. She was a very strong traditional woman, Arapaho woman. She took part in the ceremonies. Yeah, she may not have been an artist, but she was a person who lived every day as a traditional Arapaho woman. I'm called a contemporary Cheyenne ledger artist. And what I mean by that is I created my own contemporary style and reflective of the traditional ledger art of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people back in the 1800s, the late 1800s. There was a new media introduced to the Cheyenne and Arapaho, and that new media was the ledger paper. A lot of the ledger books were captured from the soldiers who were officers in the military. And so it was a new media that we could get this ledger paper and start drawing actual historical accounts of our history. Back in my time period, when I was 6 years old or 5 years old, we were in public school systems. And at that time, everybody had a Big Chief tablet. So the Big Chief tablet was my first ledger book. I didn't know it. I didn't know I was going to become a contemporary ledger artist, even though I had this Big Chief tablet with all the lines in it, learning cursive, learning how to write my name. And so when you think about that, that was my very first introduction to ledger art. The name of this is called Cheyenne Prisoners of War. You have the train and you have the warriors, and then the red and blue blankets represent not only chiefs and leadership, but they also represent the military as well, because who was it that made them become prisoners of war? It was the military. And so here I have the whiteness here, and I depicted the ghostly image of some of our ancestors in a manner that gives appearance of their soul and spirit. And I didn't want to put an identity on them. I didn't want to paint their faces, because then I would have brought them back to life. So when you see the transparency in these images, it's a reflective of their spirit being imprisoned. That's a very important painting of history, actual history of our people. The drama, the tragedy, the atrocity, the hatred that they were put through was not good. And so when I can paint these stories, I'm preserving history. I'm still telling that story of an actual account of what really happened to our people. And so I'm very honored on behalf of Redlands and this community, being Cheyenne and Arapaho, and representing them through my art.
From right here in Watonga to El Reno to Oklahoma City next, there's more art to come right here on Indian Road.
Historically and traditionally, our culture has been a culture of observant people. With wisdom, our ancestors gathered much information and applied the lessons learned to benefit their lives and the lives of the present generation.
And what I want to do today is share some facts with you about the use of commercial tobacco and how it's harming our people. See, the commercial tobacco industry doesn't want to tell you this, but they're adding about 60 different cancer-causing agents, as well as about 4,000 plus chemicals that are very harmful, like arsenic and rat poison.
And that nicotine is the addictive drug that is in even higher amounts in smokeless tobacco.
And so these things ingesting in our bodies are hurting us, hurting our future generation, our elders. You know, it's killing our people.
Big tobacco companies breed on our cultural ways, toting their products as useful to us when in reality they're deadly and far from sacred.
See, when we use commercial tobacco in our ceremonies, what we're saying is that we're ingesting these chemicals and these harmful things into our body. Again, we're not protecting ourselves. So what we want to try to do is to educate about the harmful uses of the harmful things in commercial tobacco. That way we keep our ceremonies sacred to us. And going back to what our elders taught us in the observant philosophy that we want to keep ourselves strong and healthy. So in the long run, we want to make it and keep it sacred to us.
Together, we as elders and parents and grandparents and this present generation are responsible to teach and to be role models, to carry our culture into the future. Like our ancestors, let us observe and apply the lessons learned into action. Will you stand with us today to say no to commercial tobacco products in our cultural and personal uses? Together, we can keep it sacred.
Oklahoma City's Science Museum prides itself on providing unique and thought-provoking exhibits for its patrons. One of its newest features native artwork from Harvey, Pratt, and Robert Taylor, and it does that in a big way.
I'm on the Cheyenne Arapaho rolls. I'm part Sioux, and my mother's on the Sioux rolls. And I was raised by Cheyennes. So I've heard a lot of stories my whole life growing up from people that were raised in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, you know, and they raised me, you know. Birdwoman, Mara Birdwoman, my grandfather, William Garrier, you know, and all of their relations, all listening around when we were kids telling stories. So I heard a lot of things that I wished I had remembered a lot of them, and I wished I had asked a lot more questions, but I didn't. But I do have some kind of background in some of the culture, you know, and some of the stories that I've heard, and that's kind of what I build on. We were 4 boys, 4 of us, and I had 3 sisters, so there were 7 of us. And so, and I was raised by a single mother and my grandfather, so we didn't have a lot. So we played with clay taken from the river, and we modeled things, we made things, and we played marbles, and so most of the things that we had, we made things that, you know, that we played with. So I grew up early drawing pictures because I had a pencil and paper, and then we had the clay, and so I made a lot of little figures, you know, that. So I think that helped me a lot growing up to creativity, you know, having to create my own imagination and things that we build on, and then when I started hearing stories, I remember paintings of Indians, you know, as in the 3rd and 4th grade. A lot of things that I do, whether it's art or a problem or some kind of issue, I sleep on it. I think about it, and something comes to me at night, something, whatever you want to call it, some realization, some spirit, something that helps me solve whatever my problem was. And same in art. Sometimes I'll say, I needed to make this longer. I needed to change this scarf. I needed to change that war bonnet. You know, in your dream, you do this, make it better. And that comes with a lot of other things. People are too impatient to do things, in my opinion. I think you're too impatient to get it out and get it gone. Sometimes you have to slow down, think about it, and then put it on paper and then paint it and let it come slowly. And you might have to put that painting up and go do something else, you know, and then come back after you thought about it a little bit and make your changes. So, man, things just come at you in so many different directions. It's up to you as an individual to recognize that opportunity or those changes. If you don't recognize those things, you lose them. They're gone. I think creativity comes from a lot of different directions. It's up to you as an artist or an individual to recognizes those things and then builds on it, whether it's from the beginning or the end. You have to build on it. You have to turn it into something. You know, that little idea has to grow, and that happens with me in my art. I've noticed that I'll have a little idea, and I can tie something to it, and then something else to it. So it evolves. To me, art is something that evolves. I don't just see the grand picture all at once. It comes together, you know, and then at some point you can say, that's all I can do, or I could keep messing with this painting forever. No one told me, you know, growing up, I didn't realize that I had any kind of gift at all. Someone had to tell me. Someone had to tell me, Harvey, you can paint. Harvey, you can draw. So I think that's important that we do that to our children, because children are children. They don't recognize their own skills, their own abilities. Someone has to tell you, you're good at writing, continue to write, you know. You're good at painting, continue to paint, work at it. You know, you got to make people do things. If you just ignore those gifts, they go away.
I was raised by my grandparents quite a bit. My grandfather was Cherokee, Osage, and Scottish, and he came to the state in a covered wagon as a newborn in 1899 out of Texas. And I traveled a lot with him, and I learned a lot of my history at the back of a white Ford pickup, because no matter where we'd travel, we'd go travel along, and he'd stop and tell me to imagine 100, 200 years ago. And then he'd start talking about the way life was lived at that time. The people I was raised around were a lot of absentee Shawnee, a lot of Kiowa, and Osage. There was a mesh of different tribal groups where I was raised in Tulsa. And we all became good friends, not because of that tribal affiliations, but because we liked each other. I discovered we kind of saw the world a lot in the same way, in the same bent. And so because of that, I think it influenced me that way, and my grandfather influenced me. I just can't say how much the man influenced me. And the one thing he always told me was never let anybody define you. Nobody tells you who you are, and you are who you live to be. Really all I'm doing is building a door. And if I decorate it right, you open the door, and where you go is art. And that's what the definition for me of art is. This is one of those that got titled when it's finished, because the original title was going to be Child of the Universe. Because what I wanted to say is that we're all made of the same stuff that the stars are made of. Every human being on an atomic level, we can't get away from the fact that we're the same. And we all have a song to sing, just like the shadow belongs to the substance. We belong to each other, no matter what. That's what makes us human. And I use a lot of butterflies because under this human cocoon, we're all butterflies inside the human spirit. And that's what this painting's about. And that's what I try to thrust most of my works about. It's a fingerprint that we all have, that's in our DNA, because we're all one tribe. And if I can show that that's the case, that somebody from one culture, from 3 different cultures can stand in front of a painting and they all go, ah, then I've been successful. Every human being is an artist. And the good thing for a tribal individual to be able to do, it allows them to make sense of the what we want to call the civilized world now, because there is a big difference between what tribal life dictates versus when you walk into the real world, and you have to find that bridge. And I think art is one of the best bridges that we can use.
Using art as a bridge to connect people. Now, what a great concept that is. Speaking of connecting with people, we met a guy recently who does that extremely well. So well, in fact, that Nike contacted him to do artwork for them. And he lives right here in Oklahoma. We were lucky enough to spend a few minutes with Bunky Echohawk.
I'm enrolled in the Yakima Nation of Washington State. I'm a tribal member of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma, where I reside. I take a great deal of pride being based out of Oklahoma, and everywhere I go all over the country, you know, this is always the motherland to me. So. I'm a huge advocate for youth issues, you know, for our actual indigenous youth. I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe and studied there, and went on to the University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado. I don't believe that you're ever, you know, truly done learning. So, you know, I'm always, I'm kind of a nerd, I guess, in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm always reading, whether it's, you know, books on art, you know, other contemporary artists or art history, or, you know, especially our native history. I just can't emphasize enough how important our education is to our native people. MC1, the DJ from today, was really, you know, I've worked with him at a number of youth events in the past, and you know, it's all about you know, connectivity. There's a synergy that exists in Indian country. You know, we're all closely related, and you know, I think there's only 2 degrees of separation in Indian country. You know, like everybody knows everybody. So it's about, you know, connecting with them, but actually listening to them. You know, like letting them have a platform to voice their concerns and their issues, to find their own way towards those paths towards leadership. This warrior who's on this spiritual journey, going through life, connected to the universe, but moving forward. It's one thing that I think to get educated and, you know, go off and get that education, but it's a whole Indian thing to come back and give that education back to your people and serve your people.
I hope you enjoyed our very first episode of Indian Road right here on Cheyenne and Arapaho Television. We plan on bringing you many, many more in the future. Ha-ho, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Indian Road.
It's good, and Tony Robinson is on fire and leads her team to their first championship.
Where I come from, community comes first. We celebrate our history, our traditions, and our future. With our community on the line, it's time to concentrate and commit to being first again. I'm concerned that childhood obesity affects American Indian and Alaska Native youth more than any other race in the U.S. today. That's why I've joined the First Ladies Let's Move in Indian Country initiative. Together we can eat healthy, be more active, and show our youth how to transform their lives and communities. Be the first in your community to take that first step to change the lives of the next generation. Visit Let's Move in Indian Country to find out more.
You're watching CATV 47, K47MU, Concho, Oklahoma.